Episode 6 of Asia is called The Arid Heart, and it's about the deserts, and to a lesser degree the grasslands of Asia. So we open up in the Gobi Desert, and here we see one of the rarest animals on earth, which is the Gobi bear. So this is a type of brown bear, but there's only like 40 of them left in the world, so it's quite impressive that they got any footage of them at all. I figured we'd get a couple of shots, I didn't think we'd get an extensive picture of their lives. We see them feeding, we see them going to oases, we see a mother with a cub. It's basically just them doing things that other bears do, but the fact that they're so rare makes it seem quite impressive. Now, because there's so few of them left, it's very unlikely that a lot of them will actually see another bear within their lives. But the sequence when they're scratching against the tree was good because the music was very similar to the sequence in Planet Earth 2, where the bears were doing the same thing. It was quite comedic, and while it wasn't the exact same music, it was definitely an homage to that, which I quite liked. But no, that whole sequence was great. Then we see Jerboa, so this is a kind of more comedic sequence. We just see them hunting insects, and it's quite fun. We see them jumping up to catch moths. The Jerboas, I kind of figured would be a bit more of a comedic sequence. It was never going to be a highlight, but it was still good. I still enjoyed it. It's probably one of the better Jerboa sequences we've had. Then we go to the Thar Desert in India, and here we see that it's very populated, there's a lot of people living there, it's basically a city, and here we see that Demoiselle cranes visit. So the Demoiselle cranes have always visited this area, but only really as a stopover. But here, because people generally are very tolerant of animals and actually feed them, the cranes are very well fed, and it's got to the point where this is actually where they spend the winter. They would have obviously gone a lot further in the past, but no, there's no need. I like the Demoiselle cranes, I like them in Planet Earth, and I like them here. And then we saw Asiatic lions. So this was the sequence that I was most looking forward to when the trailer dropped. I've always wanted to see Asiatic lions. We've never seen them before in a series like this. And here, similar to the Gobi bears, there's not a lot of them left. This is really the last stronghold. And here we see a family of lions. We see them hunting, and then when they can't catch the deer, they then scavenge a leopard kill. It wasn't a massively extensive sequence, but I really liked just seeing the Asiatic lions. I think if it wasn't an animal I was so looking forward to seeing, I maybe wouldn't rate it as highly. It did a really good job of showing you the differences between lions in Asia and Africa, because apart from just obviously being a different population, they did look a bit different. They looked a lot more kind of scabby. I feel like the lions in the Namib Desert that we've seen in the past looked a lot better off than these ones. So I think that was really good. It was a good sequence. It maybe wasn't the series highlight that I was hoping it would be, but I still really liked it. Then we go to the Arabian Desert. We see that a lot of sand gets blown into the Persian Gulf, and it actually creates sand deserts. And we see that Socotra cormorants nest there. So we saw this a little bit in Planet Earth, but this is a much more in-depth look at this. It was cool seeing them nesting there, and how this area, because a lot of nutrients are being blown from the desert, is actually a very good fishing ground, so hence why there's a lot of cormorants here. But what was really interesting about the sequence was discussing what happens when the parents stop feeding their chicks. You get a lot of juvenile cormorants that are not getting fed by their parents, and they've no way of getting out to sea to feed themselves, so they're basically having to scavenge. We see them mugging other cormorants to stop them feeding their own chicks. However, it got even more dark when you saw that they actually turned to cannibalism. I kind of figured that's where we were going with the sequence as it went on. I was like, okay, this feels quite dark. And it was not a huge shock that's where it went. The imagery of the cormorant juveniles eating the chicks was pretty grim, if I'm honest. I do kind of respect them for showing that. Didn't expect them to show that. It was quite brutal. It kind of reminded me of the first seals in the first episode, although probably even more dark, in that it kind of felt quite brutal and quite honest. But yeah, it was definitely pretty bleak. And we see this one male cormorant who's got his chick. He needs to leave because there's no food coming. And as soon as he goes, all the juveniles swarm around and they start pecking at it. And they're probably going to tear it apart. The whole time I was like, I need the parents to come back and save the chick. Thankfully they did. They managed to shoo off the juveniles and save the chick. Great stuff. Then the other parent comes back and brings some food. Thank God for that. I was very much on the edge of my seat there. I also did a really good job at the end of talking about how, realistically, when that chick is no longer being fed by its parents, it will probably do the same thing. So I think while you were rooting for the chick, you're very much like, I mean, I guess if this was a couple of weeks before, I'd probably be rooting to the chicks that were attacking it. Then we see the Aral Kum, which is the newest desert, and it used to be a lake. You can see a lot of boats that are still there. Because the river that fed it was dammed, it's basically just turned into a desert, and it's created these very vast sandstorms that get swept as far east as China. It was really daunting seeing the sandstorms. It definitely reminded me of Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. I was like, I don't want to be in that. And it was even worse as showing you the aftermath when the sandstorm's still there. Because here you see that the whole cities are basically engulfed in sand. You feel like there's a lot of people that probably die of respiratory problems, so that's not good. And the rest of the episode concentrates on the Eurasian steppe. We see a Pallas's cat hunting what looks like gerbils, And while it was cool seeing it hunting, I feel like I'd seen that kind of thing before in other cats, but what I hadn't seen before was it actually using its tail to kind of hypnotise the gerbils into staying still so it could actually grab them. That was interesting. And then we see Mongolian gazelle. So we've seen them before in Planet Earth briefly. Again, a much more in-depth look here. We see the Mongolian gazelles travelling south in their migration. However, now there is the Trans-Siberian Railway, which I think we've all heard of. They have to pass through this barbed wire fence, which not all of them make it through. And even when they get through, they have to get through the other side, another barbed wire fence, in addition to the train tracks. There's also feral dogs there. It feels like everything around the tracks is just there to make their lives very difficult. And the dog catching the gazelle again was quite bleak as well. That was a really good sequence. I feel like there hasn't been a great amount of environmental stuff in this series so far. Obviously the next episode we probably will get more. But this definitely felt like the most impactful sequence of this series with regards to human impacts on the environment. So that was really good. While it might not necessarily have been the most enjoyable sequence, I feel like it was one of the more important ones. And the last major sequence we get is Taki, which are the wild horses of the Mongolian steppe. These are the only wild horses left in the world, like real wild horses. There obviously are other pockets of feral horses in the world, but these are the only ones that were never tamed. They were really good. I really liked seeing them. What was really good about that sequence was showing them at night getting hunted by wolves. We see this one wolf come out to try and grab a foal. Obviously, it's getting fended off by the horses. I mean, horses are pretty intimidating animals anyway, hence why they were used in war. But as you'd expect, the wolf calls in the troops, and more wolves come in. The music was also very ominous there. We see, again, the pack of wolves try to get this foal. They get fended off by the horses, thankfully. So all's well that ends well with regards to the horses, maybe not so much for the wolves. That was a really good sequence as well. I really like that. And I feel like with an episode dealing with the grasslands, horses are probably the best animals to end on. I feel like the series has done a good job of ending each episode with the sort of best animal to represent that habitat. This was no exception. I really like that. And the diaries was all about the people filming the Gobi bears. It wasn't just them filming it, it was also the people studying it. It was nice seeing their base camp and the methods they used to gather data on them. That was really good. And seeing the guy who had basically spent years trying to film them actually managed to get one, that was really good. It was nice for him. I liked that. It was a really good sequence. So yeah, this episode was very good. It's probably my second favourite of the series after the Frozen North one. Yeah, I think the highlights for me were probably the cormorants. I like the taki, I like the gazelles, I like the Gobi bears. I feel like there was a lot in here to like. So yeah, this is a really good episode. So yeah, what were your thoughts? What did you like? What were your highlights? Let me know in the comments below. Feel free to like, comment and subscribe as ever, or don't if you don't want to. I'll be doing the next episode next week, which is all about people saving Asia's wildlife. So yeah, I'll see you next week, and goodbye.